So as we're making decisions within our organization, we're doing it with a thoughtfulness before we just turn her loose and, let everybody, go and explore. We've been very thoughtful in our approach, as I'd mentioned before, experiment, learn, and really figure out where we're going to invest.
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Kristy Folkwein. Kristy is the Chief Information Officer of Archer Daniels Midland, or ADM, a 122-year-old global leader in both human and animal nutrition that earns in excess of $88 billion in annual revenue. Kristy's been in her role for roughly 8.5 years, and across that time, she's helped modernize the technology practices of a storied company, preparing it for greater levels of innovation, leveraging data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. I look forward to hearing more about the progress she and her team continue to make through this conversation. Prior to her current role, Kristy spent over 6 years as the Chief Information Officer of Dow Performance Silicones. Kristy, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's great to be here. Look forward to our conversation.
I do as well. Thank you. Well, Kristy, let's begin with ADM's business, if you would. I mentioned a bit about its storied history, about its scale. Maybe you can fill in some blanks if you don't mind.
Not a problem. And as Peter mentioned, ADM is a 122-year-old company, Fortune 50, and we stand at that center of the world's food supply. We play a really important role all the way from transforming crops into products that meet everyday needs. Our brand, while it's not always recognizable, we have probably touched the nutrition that's part of your daily life without you even realizing it. We have over 1,100 locations, 44,000 employees across 6 continents, and we operate a very complex ecosystem and value chain that spans all the way from grain, all the way through storage to processing it, nutritional innovation, and sustainable solutions. So we've got quite a vast array of products that we produce.
Fascinating. I really appreciate that overview and certainly sheds light on that vast array and the complexity of the business that you're a part of. Talk a bit about your role as Chief Information Officer, if you wouldn't mind. No two CIO roles are exactly alike. Tell us about yours.
No, they're not. And it's always a journey. And as you mentioned, I've been here for about 8 years now, and we've gone through quite the transformation. And, that transformation was really to set us up to support this vast business that I spoke of. My role includes all technology across ADM, which is obviously crucial to the company's digital strategy. I have some traditional IT elements, enterprise architecture, PMO, running the operations of IT, applications, building things, business relationship, data and analytics, which is massive, and we're going to talk about a bit today, innovation, AI, all of these new technologies and the possibilities that they bring to our business, cybersecurity. I'm also the sponsor of a digital transformation we do in the enterprise space, which really focuses on our processes and our technologies that support the back office. Big S4 implementation, among other technologies. And it's really about, consolidating, modernizing, standardizing to help us be more agile in servicing our markets. So that's a bit about my role.
Again, a very substantial one, to be sure. Well, I would love to, as you alluded to talk a bit about your data journey, if you don't mind. An organization as complex and as broad and at the scale that you've described, that ADM's business, the process of wrangling that data in a way that becomes meaningful is easier said than done. Can you talk a bit about the initiatives you've led to improve the quality and integrity of ADM's business data, rather, and would love to hear more about, as we get further in our conversation, the ways in which you derive value from that?
Absolutely. And wrangling, I think, is a perfect word. Data's key. It's our North Star. And, why you say wrangling balance is also important. And, coming from this 122-year-old company that grew up through acquisition, over time and through those acquisitions and through the growth, we have a lot of data, but maybe not necessarily a lot of information. It's not standard. It's stored in many places. And with our maturity journey with the data, which is also being championed by our new CFO, which is a big help, is really that advocate for how do we continue to find the metrics that matter. Over time, there are metrics that matter at the micro level, but what matters at the macro level, and how do we provide that information to better run our corporation? And what I would say is it's happened over time in many ways. One way is a real focus on the master data and where we put master data, who are our customers across all of our divisions, how do we define that? It's also defining all the data elements across those different dimensions I talked about. How are we going to define our the KPIs of the corporation? So we define it consistently and can really start looking across our broad portfolio of businesses as well as IT products. And at the same time, I talked about one ADM. This is our future state. It's a very large S4 implementation, standard processes and technologies, over 38 different technologies that are being provided. But as everyone on this call probably knows, it's a long journey to get to the promised land. So we've got a lot of other disparate data, but how do we make that available today to make better decisions, back to those metrics that matter? So we're also doing a lot of work to, if you will, make data available, stitch it together, however you want to define it, in ways to put it in the hands of the organization so they know that it's certified data, they can trust it, but also use it now to make better decisions while we're on this journey of digitization for the corporation.
That's a really great description of a complex series of activities to do that wrangling we referred to earlier. I'd love to talk a bit more about the fruit of that labor, some of the value that you and the team are deriving as a result of the work that you've just described. Can you talk a bit about that?
Absolutely. As we've worked on our data and our data environment, as well as strengthening the governance for that data, to standardize anything, there needs to be a level of governance and really see the benefits of all of this capability. Our AI analytics journey at scale really started back early 2020 with this fragmented data I've been speaking about. And all of our analytics at that time were very bespoke: Excel, Power BI, a wide range of tools all over the corporation. We really needed to be able to provide regional or business level insights. So with that consolidation of information, we really started to explore, obviously, advanced analytics techniques, examples, linear optimization and production scheduling and forecasting, where we've seen some success, decision trees for pricing, where we've seen a lot of success. And we've also done some work with global machine learning models, where we've also leveraged, we have an enterprise scale Salesforce.com capability. And we're able, with some other these newer techniques, to be able for our business, one of our businesses, to identify new customers, prioritize cross-sell opportunities, predict customer attrition. And we have seen tremendous success with this type of matching of enterprise class capabilities, and then stitching our data together and providing it in new and different ways to be able to truly see the value. And, that's always the struggle for us. I talk about, what's 4 words, stitching data or putting it together. It sounds so simple, but it's very time consuming. It's very complex. It takes, a lot of data engineers and others. But when we can do this successfully, we're really reaping some value today of pulling this data together and integrating it with some of our other systems to be able to provide the value. And with value comes a lot more opportunity. And we're really focused on how we can build that out for the corporation.
You alluded briefly at the conclusion there, the data engineers and others who are breathing life into what you described. Can you go into a bit more depth in terms of the team that's behind this? It's understandable that we would focus on some of the process or technical details, but obviously this is really brought to life by a team as well. Describe the team that's behind this on your end.
Absolutely. And what I would say is where we see the most success in ADM is where we have that strong product ownership in the business. And so let's stay with the example I just talked about with some of our Salesforce and the modeling we've done around customer attrition, et cetera. This is a true partnership with the business that understands our customers and understands their processes. With our technology people, it can be data engineers, it might be Salesforce developers, it could be, process analysts and other types of people, but it's when they come together as one product team to iterate in agile ways to build these products that truly meet the requirements of the business and servicing our customers, that we find the most value. So we tend to try to approach these projects in that type of way. It's not just a traditional IT project where requirements are thrown over the wall and we build something and we throw it back. It's more that partnership to iterate to really find the solutions that meet the needs of the business and the customers ultimately.
Again, very well said. Really interesting how you've thought about knitting that together and how the product model itself has created unusual partnerships that have been creative along the way as well. You also alluded in a couple of parts of our conversation so far, machine learning and advances in artificial intelligence. And I know from our past conversations, Kristy, this also extends to generative artificial intelligence as well. Can you talk a bit about your own pathway and progress relative to these different parts of algorithmic technology?
Absolutely. And, where I would start, which, I almost ended the last one, but I'll talk about it here. I've said balance how many times? And, there's always that balance because there's always hundreds of use cases. This could work here. And what about the possibility there? And as we continue to figure out that balance, you still have to support the traditional AI systems, and you need to build these systems for the future. And we use a very pragmatic approach. We start very small with experiments. We have a group of people that help make these decisions of where we invest. And, we check them along regular. Do we want to scale it? Do we want to invest more? Let's take it to the next level. And then we finally find, like I talked about prior with Salesforce and some of our learning models there, when we find something that we truly see the value, we call it graduating. That's when we'll embed this back into scale for the organization to be able to leverage. So that's the model that we continue to use here. Hundreds of possibilities, experiment, see where there's value, and then continue to invest until ultimately, hopefully, it will graduate if we truly see a lot of value. But early on, we had been working with language models, text interpretation. So when ChatGPT hit the scene in November of 22, we really saw this as an accelerator for some things that we were already doing. And 23, we really had a year of learning. As these models came about, we really worked with partners, Google, Accenture, Microsoft, anyone we could talk to really understand these models. And there's lots of different models. And what are the models good for? We also really started to experiment with them. It's offering new capabilities, interpretation of video, different things that we've never been able to do before. So we tried to use a lot of different use case experiments just to internal team understand what's real in parallel with really building out that initial cloud foundation for generative AI. Also, we work with our legal organization and others of, okay, what is our stance on this? And we created a council to really oversee this capability that's running today. So as we're making decisions within our organization, we're doing it with a thoughtfulness before we just turn her loose and, let everybody, go and explore. We've been very thoughtful in our approach, as I'd mentioned before, experiment, learn, and really figure out where we're going to invest. So with that year of learning, we've had some successes. And as you and I were speaking, I thought of a couple of different one that we're really start on the early days of, but we think has some promise, and one that's a bit farther along, just where we've seen some of the successes examples. And one of our real successes is around flavor creation, and this is in our nutrition business. And we realized that this new capability with generative AI could really help us in the food science and research space to really accelerate our ability to iterate and find recipes, the right recipes. Again, with our vast organization, with pockets of information, how can we pull all of this information together to be able to iterate through it to find those right recipes? So again, our technology team with, in this case, a data scientist and, some data engineers worked side by side with our flavorists for many months, really working through all of our formulation data. How do we structure it? What data do we need? How do we make the relationships and the interpretation that's required? And then we could really start leveraging this to see if we can, at the end of the day, come up with flavor opportunities faster. Because when our customers approach us for new opportunities, speed is the name of the game. So we use this to really iterate through this, to look at all of those different possibilities. And what we started to find is these models recommended some flavors that our flavorists stated they would never have created, but yet they did create them, some samples based on this AI model. They were coming in at a lower cost and the flavors are outstanding. So, we're seeing real promise here, and we're in different stages of development of this, of actual production of the product, but lots of good information here. And, I think the theme of both of my examples is there's a saying in ADM, if ADM only knew what ADM knew. I think now with this new capability, how we can relearn what we already know through some of these models and being able to get information out of the organization that's in a lot of disparate, unstructured ways, it is where the value is really being seen right now. Another area similar that we're finding potential real value is in manufacturing, and we call it the knowledge hub. And it's a bit of the same problem, is we have significant tribal knowledge all over the corporation. It's not being captured in ways that can readily be used. When people leave, the knowledge leaves. And it's especially challenging in locations where we don't, we have smaller locations in some cases, and we don't have, ways outside of the site, if you will, to share that information across sites. So we don't get internal to the site or across site to be able to truly share that information. The other challenge we have is frontline workers aren't always comfortable with these systems interfaces where we want them to click in, add their data, because we don't get the human aspect of what are they thinking, or how might they approach this? What are they viewing? So what we're doing now is with these models, we're capturing root cause analysis, incident reports across lots of locations. We have different ways to collect information, that tribal knowledge, and we really do it through audio capture. So as an example, if we have an incident with a piece of equipment, the resolution team could hit record, and the system would prompt them to talk through, what'd you observe? How did this issue present itself? What's your ideas? How are you thinking through solving this? And later on, what worked well? What didn't? What might be a future recommendation to avoid this? And while we're still in the infancy, we're finding a lot of promise here, because it can be very tailored to the type of role, to the type of business. And it's a way to capture that knowledge that in the past we really didn't have a way to capture. So promising, not complete, but that's another area where these new tools are offering ways to solve these age-old problems that we didn't have before. ADM is also deploying Chat ADM, and which is really our safe and secure internal chat solution. We've prototyped many different options. I use Chat ADM probably 2 or 3 times a day just for normal work, even in preparation from this, write a script, summarize this for me. And then I can just really look at it in more summary form. And I mean, just little things like that for productivity is a big help. But where I'd kind of like to close this question is I would really be remiss if I didn't point out the recognition of the risks and the costs. This whole bring your own AI trend could unintentionally expose our proprietary information. Lots of vendors approach all of our business users wanting to help, and our business users aren't always savvy enough to, in that help, they get our information if we're not careful on how we structure those contracts and who owns, the intellectual property of the data. We also have, just this week alone, several different people are coming saying, a great new AI, generative AI tool out, it's $200 a month. Will the company pay for this because I'm going to get great value out of it? Obviously, every vendor we have are giving, new capabilities for X dollars a month to get more productivity. And, it's really something we have to manage because, obviously adopting all this capability is great, but we have to protect our data. We have to contain our costs. We have to ensure this innovation aligns with the goals of the company as well as that we actually get the value out of it. We just can't afford all of this new capability if there's not real measurable value out of the work that we do. So long answer to a short question, but that's a bit about the AI side of the equation.
A great answer to that question, Kristy, and I appreciate how comprehensive it was with examples of how you put this in place, as well as a great assessment of the challenges and risks to manage through as well. Also, those are quite consequential, needless to say. And I wonder, as I hear you talk about the methods that you've used and the means by which you've exposed this to the broader organization, I'd love to understand a little bit further about how you've thought about the further introduction and training, and as you set guardrails, the communication of those sorts of things. As you point out, this isn't necessarily something that's so easy to intuit and requires a lot of deep thinking. You mentioned the council that's been put together to ensure that the variety, I assume, a variety of different perspectives are lent to those very same policies and governance structures and so on. Can you talk a bit about for lack of a better way of framing it, the training and the onboarding of these ideas to the broader organization?
Yeah, what I would say, I think about this as digital culture, and all of these elements play into the digital culture of a corporation. And this is an area that, we're setting goals right now in ADM, and this is you'll see this in a lot of our goals is how do we help the organization raise our digital awareness? How do we get people using Chat ADM to know how to use it? How do we get people using data for decision making versus collecting data, creating dashboards? Because that's what we've always had to do in the past. We have great skills there. But how do we teach our people to use this information, for value creation or troubleshooting or whatever the case may be? I think how we're doing some of those things, if you look internal to IT, we have something called Feast Your Mind. And on a monthly basis, we'll have tech talks, if you will, on topics across our organization. And what I would say is it's probably the best attended thing that we do as an IT organization every single month, because we bring in, our technicians, the people that have the real experience that went through building the first models, what they find, what worked, what didn't work, where's value, where's no value. Sometimes we'll bring in externals, but we tend to try to stay with those people that have the experience and how to share it. More broadly in the organization is where we're going to really focus this year. One thing we're trying to do, we just have to figure out how to do it at scale, is to make sure that we can really, all of these experiments I talked about, every experiment has a story. What was a problem we were trying to solve? What worked and what didn't work? How do we share that? And how do we create little vignettes about the experiments we did, what worked, what didn't work, where we're seeing promise, and how we're getting that promise? And so we're trying to do better at those story tells that we can really share with a broader organization. We're continuing to try to mature our governing body. I think of it almost like a VC approach. Let's bring experiments, people across the business. Where do you want to invest? Okay, these ideas I like. Well, let's invest. Next month, let's see what we found. Are we seeing the early promise? With these, different ways we have to work today, we can get some quick turnaround. So those are just a few. I could go on and on, obviously, but those are a few things top of mind that we're really trying to do to build awareness across the corporation.
Yeah, I get a very thoughtful approach. Kristy, thank you for providing that insight. I wanted to, more generally speaking, as 2025 is upon us here, as you look to the future, what are some other areas that excite you, trends that you're investigating or perhaps investing in?
When you ask me this question, I'll tell you, this is the one that probably I've put the most thought into, because there's obviously trends that excite me, but there's also trends that make me nervous. And, it's It's the wild, wild west, if you will, in some cases. So if I start on the excited side, is all of these new technologies and the rate with which the technologies are coming out is energizing, exciting. And how do we continue putting these in the hands of the people that can know and help them know how to leverage them is huge. Edge AI, machine vision in manufacturing is something that is interesting. You know, now with generative AI and being able to interpret video and other things and react to it opens up a whole new possibility area for us, you know, to take the human out of it on those early stages is to identify the beginning of a problem so that we because our people can't be everywhere. They can't be watching vibrations or other types of things that this offers up a whole new possibility. I think the other thing that, you know, is helping us is open source ecosystems are immense. And our team is really learning how to leverage these to test concept quickly. I talk about our experimentation. We don't have to go, you know, stand up big tools. We don't have to go procure tools. You know, we've obviously got our cloud environments where you can spin up something really quickly, open source, you know, use technologies for those early experimentation to see if there's value before you invest. That's huge for the corporation. In the past, you would almost have to stand something up or prototype, which could take months. And now we can do this in a very short period of time in those early phases. So those are my excitement if I had to list two. But on the worry side of it is, you know, the proprietary nature of our data. How when we have a huge value chain of information, how do we protect that? How do we keep all of our providers from training models on our data? And so data and all the regulation, privacy and others, it gets really tricky. The major push by all of our technology vendors to the cloud or subscription models. How do we as organizations navigate that? I mean, we own a mainframe. Even our mainframe providers are trying to move us to subscription models. In the past, you know, as a large manufacturing organization, we would put in place technology and we'd ride it for decades. And it's how we ran our business. It was, you know, on-prem and, you know, we would modify it or customize it and we would write it. And technology, every vendor is trying to move you away from that. And, you know, we're getting hit with subscriptions, you know, huge price increases, forced upgrades. So interesting times we're in, and we're spending a lot of time really thinking through what this could look like, how this plays out over the next 5 to 10 years. 5 years, that's probably about as long. And, you know, while there's value to what they're bringing, it also has to be cost effective. You know, I keep talking about value and return on investment. And, you know, it's great with all this potential technology the vendors are bringing, but if there's not value to us, that's a real return, it doesn't work. The last thing I would say in my worries is cybersecurity. And, you know, this recent memory of CloudStrike that we all experienced and the far-reaching impacts of all these shared technologies is something we have to keep in the front of our minds too and protect our corporations from. So while I'm excited about the future, I think there's also some areas we need to navigate that we don't have all the answers to.
Well, it's wise to be cautiously optimistic, to both lean into the optimism and make sure the organization is experimenting, but also to ensure that there is that caution in mind, since, as you point out, there are consequential risks to operating as though it's the Wild West, to use a term you mentioned a bit earlier as well. I wanted to ask you as well, Kristy, you know, as somebody who is very thoughtful, and I know mine's a broader ecosystem for inspiration and ideas, is there anything that you recently read, watched, and or listened to that you would recommend to your peers?
You know, it's interesting. I'm a big reader, a voracious reader. I love podcasts. I like listening to a lot of interesting things. And boy, there's a lot of interesting things on podcasts nowadays. But, you know, when the question was asked, what have I recently read? What am I reading? A peer of mine in ADM recommended a read for me. And you know, it was so relevant as a CIO with high demands, technology, problem solving, future. it's really resonated. And the book is actually called The Subtle Art of Not Giving Care. I'm not going to use the real word there, but it's by Mark Manson. And this book has been excellent. I've actually recommended it to quite a few people because it really is about the necessity of prioritizing what really matters. Our struggles and challenges are inevitable, but by, really focusing in and caring about what you focus on, it leads to more fulfillment. And in my world, the struggle and the struggles we go with people implementing, SAP is not for the weak of heart. And those struggles and those challenges also bring a very high level of satisfaction. And, happiness requires struggle, so is the premise of this book. And what are you willing to struggle for? If you want to move ahead, are you willing to put in the struggles and the travel and the navigation of, politics or 60-hour weeks? And, if you want the reward, there's a struggle that comes with life. And so this one's one that's resonated. I think it showed up at the right time for me. And I think it was written in maybe 2016. But this is the one that I would probably recommend, as somebody recommended it to me. And like I said, it's a really good read for the world we live in right now, trying to navigate always. There's so many distractions. What's important and how do we stay focused on that? And life is struggles.
Well, it seems like a theme that you've maybe naturally taken to heart, but certainly as you think about the many ways in which you help the organization prioritize what is going to create the most value. You talked about the experimentation that you do and finding those ideas that will eventually be the scalable ones and casting aside the ones that will not, but always having a mind towards experimentation. Clearly, these ideas resonate, perhaps because it's something that's also in you and the way in which you're oriented as a business leader. But
you're probably right.
even if maybe you don't use quite the colorful language that Mark Manson does.
I know. That's a little bit much in the book, but you finally get down to it. But,
exactly. I think you said to me before that eventually you become immune to the number of F-bombs that are thrown around in this tome to get to the great message behind it. Well, good. Well, Kristy Folkwein, thank you so much for a fantastic conversation, for sharing a range of details of the remarkable transformation you've been leading at scale at your organization. I really appreciate the thoughtful conversation.
And thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate spending this time with you today.